Today we have two interesting topics presented to you by John Sotiropoulos, I hope you pronounced the surname correctly, and Nariman, Aga-Tagiyev. The first talk will be on large language models, and the other one on SAMM's roadmap to SSDLC. But first, some introduction from the chapter meeting, from the chapter itself. The agenda for today. We'll start with a couple of chapter updates, what is going on with OWASP Netherlands, Belgium, or OWASP Global, followed by the presentation OWASP Top 10 for LLM apps and Gen.AI security by John Sotiropoulos. Then we'll have a short break, so you can grab yourself another drink if so desired. Of course, should you have any questions for John, feel free to voice them in the chat. I will relay those questions to John at the end of his presentation. After the break, we will continue with building a robust AppSec program, SAMM's roadmap to SSDLC maturity by Nariman, Aga-Tagiyev. And again, I hope I pronounced the name correctly. After that, a closing and a feedback, which means I will present you with a QR code, which would direct you to a form where you can leave any feedback and help us improve with our upcoming chapter meetings. First of all, the agenda. OWASP Global is having a new AppSec EU, and that one is in Barcelona. It's 26 to 29 May, so the end of May, and I think that might also be the the Ascension Day weekend. So if you do have a chance, visit OWASP Global AppSec at Barcelona. If you want to stay closer at home, the OWASP Netherlands has another virtual chapter meetup, just like this one, on 19 June. Details about the topics will be displayed on our website, owasp.nl, and can also be found through Meetup or even on our YouTube page. And finally, OWASP Benelux is usually the last Thursday and Friday of November. There's a small change this time in that we're going to the 2nd and 3rd of December for the OWASP Benelux chapter days, 1 day of training and 1 day of presentations. It is hosted in Belgium, and more updates will be added shortly through our mailing list, on our website, or through the channels known for OWASP Belgium. We hope to see you all then. So websites, in case you don't know them yet, I hope you do actually. Our website, owasp.nl. The meetup page, meetup.com/OWASP chapter Netherlands meetup. There should be a shorter way for that. LinkedIn, we have a YouTube channel. Now you're watching it, so you found it. Good work. And the email netherlands@owasp.org if you have any questions for us. Of course, other contact details can be found on the website of owasp.nl. As with always, the Benelux days are, of course, made possible by various sponsors. And here you see the sponsors for last year's edition. If you know anyone or yourself have interest in becoming a sponsor for the new OWASP Benelux days, feel free to reach out to either OWASP Netherlands or Belgium chapter, and we'll help you further from that. More information on the Benelux days will be published, of course, on our websites, as well as any sponsor packages available. And now, to the speakers. As I said, the first one is John. So, John, on the OWASP Top 10 for LLM apps and Gen.AI security. I would say, if you would share your screen, please.
I have shared it, let's see.
Yep, I see it there. That's working fine. So, John, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll try my Dutch. Goedenavond, dames en heren. Thank you very much for your invite. I don't speak any more Dutch. My name is John Sotiropoulos. I work for a large UK company that we safeguard national scale AI projects. And I'm also part of the leadership of the OWASP Top 10 for LLM apps that has now become the Gen.AI security project. And we will talk about that and why that's important to you and hopefully, how it can help you elevate your generative AI security. My main job is to, apart from leading the project, is to align with standards, organizations, and national cyber agencies. And we'll talk about the Agentic Security Initiative. We started that in January. I lead that, and I represent it in the AI Safety Institute Consortium in the US. And part of all this, that I'm listing all this, is because I think, and that will frame our conversation, is that AI is really changing and transforming the cybersecurity landscape. Is momentum changes that happen, both in the tools that we can use, but also the new types of threats and risks that emerge. And we try to bring resources that help you upskill and uplift, if you like, the existing cybersecurity that you have in place to respond to those changes. And I think this is really important. One of the reasons I've also written a book, Adversarial AI, that actually, to my surprise, hit number 3. And that, again, was a proof point that people need the resources to do the job properly, to secure new things that AI brings. Another interesting experience for me, and that will kind of start framing the conversation or the presentation we have today, is I was asked by the UK government to create the implementation guide for the new cybersecurity code of practice that actually is becoming I think this week or next week, an international ETSI standard, the baseline cybersecurity requirements for AI models and systems. And it's the first life cycle based security guidance. I highly recommend that you have a look at that. Because it describes not just, it doesn't give you some list of things to do. It goes through the life cycle and it helps you relate the things that you know you need to do in a kind of very practical way. And this was actually for me an interesting moment because I realized, although I'm part of the leadership of the team, I realized how much stuff a project has that can be used across the life cycle. And if you read that implementation guide, you will find a massive amount of references to OWASP material, but also particularly the Gen.AI project, the Top 10 for LLM then project, indicating that actually we have more than people know us. It isn't just the top 10. And today what I want to do is to take you through that and help you understand all the resources we have available and how can you apply them into your work securing generative AI. But let's start from the beginning. In 2023, I was one of the founding members there, the Top 10 for LLM Applications project, and we worked very rapidly. In fact, we were surprised that we had 150 contributors very soon to establish really a safe foundation, a framework of how do we secure, what are the key threats for LLM applications. Back in those days, ChatGPT, LLM applications were quite new. People hadn't explored all the aspects. They hadn't rolled out any applications. So our approach was to empirically and through conversations, through expert opinion, try and frame the problem. And we focused on some key things like input and output prompt injection, that I'm sure everyone is familiar with, and output handling. And that relates to the fact that generative AI mixes instructions to the model with prompts and natural language, making it really, really susceptible to jailbreaking and manipulation. So that was the focus of our work. But we also looked at how people could take that further and exploit access to systems and data, how they can exfiltrate sensitive information or drive the system to unintended consequences. Machine learning was part of that, so we looked at that too. And for the first time, we talked about over-reliance as a safety concern that people needed to know about, because now it isn't a straightforward saying I'm producing something securely and it doesn't matter what comes out of it. As I'm sure many of you know, the top 10 became viral, became an iconic top 10, I would say, adopted by many, many organizations, hundreds of conference sessions, articles, conversations, courses, even vendors like AWS. If you go and see some of the material they have on security, they talk about the top 10, the threat modeling tool. It kind of demonstrates how to use it with the top 10. But also, government. So the UK government, for instance, when they issued their first guidelines, the first framework on generative AI, they recommended the top 10 as the number one practical security recommendation. They weren't the only one. So that was a kind of a massive success for us. But that gave us also the ability to engage with the community, to learn more since it was first introduced. So 2023 was our initial step to frame the problem. But back in November, when we released 2025, the latest version of our top 10, we now had more knowledge, a more diverse group of contributors that could tell us how they employ generative AI, how do they employ LLM applications, and therefore fine-tune and update what we consider as the top threats and risks. And you can see the influence there of time, of how people started applying LLMs, and therefore supply chain became a concern because they started accessing open access models, and therefore some of the things that we saw there around lobotomization, around tampering, around supply chain became very important. But also RAG, for instance, that became something that actually changed the way people were using LLM at the time, bringing in their own data. So vector and embedding weaknesses were another item that we added. We also, when we did the first top 10, we made the assumption that system prompts will be quite securely, and therefore we shouldn't worry about them. All the feedback that was really, really hotly debated, the system prompt leakage, but it was highly requested by the community, saying that's not always the case, and you need to highlight it because actually people don't always secure it, and therefore it becomes a very, very critical vulnerability and attack vector. We extended the excessive agency to capture the agentic, the emergence back then of the agentic apps. And also kind of talked about misinformation and unbounded consumption. I'll explain in a minute why we changed the terminology there. But overall, this was an evolution. This was something that we reflected on what the community told us that they're doing. We reflected where the market was going, and we incorporated those new threats and risks there and the associated mitigations. And here is a kind of a summary of the changes. So you can see on 2025 that this increasing deployment of LLM applications makes data consents more relevant, and therefore the sensitive information disclosure becomes quite a concern. As I said, open access LLM models, therefore supply chain vulnerabilities. If you go to Hugging Face, you will find models there that they can have all kinds of vulnerabilities there. We renamed the training data poisoning to data model poisoning because they can also tamper models, not just alter the data. And we merged the insecure plugin design with excessive agency and a little bit of supply chain vulnerability, because actually that's part of orchestrating tools, which is what agentic AI does. Over-reliance, instead of having it as a safety concern, we reframe it as misinformation to capture a broader thing of abuse, deliberate or accidental, of LLM systems, and how cybersecurity professionals need, without becoming safety professionals, kind of safeguard against that. And we merge the model theft and model denial of service into unbounded consumption, which is all about how do we secure the infrastructure, the underlying infrastructure of LLM applications, so that it's not really abused, rather than have individual items appearing there. So that was kind of the main chain and main changes. And overall, welcome to the community. All the discussions we had with the community were quite positive, and it took us actually long conversations and brainstorming sessions. And if any of you are on the Slack channel, You will see we keep a record of all the debate that took place. We use voting, we use feedback forms. So that gave us not only the latest in the top 10, but it allows us to expand the community. So it was amazing to see that when we started at the beginning, I said we had 150 Slack joiners. Well, back in February, we have in excess of 2,500 Slack joiners. And if you're part of our Slack channels, you will see the vibrant discussion that we have, the followers that we have. So overall, really, it came to a point where we realized that actually we have exceeded our original remit. There is a much more scalable community here, and perhaps we need to fine tune the way it works so that we can both have more details. Some of the conversations we're having is, can you do top 10? Do you need top 20? How do you give more detailed information? So we thought, well, we have this big community, we can actually leverage that to produce more detailed guidance to our community. And this is where, in addition to the top 10, we have produced a number of resources that give you more detail and more in-depth guidance of how to safeguard LLM applications, because I don't think the top 10 can ever do that. The top 10 gives you that headlines, that compass, if you like, to understand what the risks are and the mitigations at a very high level, but then you definitely need deeper guidance. And that's kind of the resources that I also referenced in the implementation guide. And that was, the realization that the project has gone far beyond the top 10, which remains, if you like, the kind of the guiding headlines, but then we have all those new guidelines that can help you. And I want today to take you through that and help you understand how to use that so that you can safeguard your generative AI and LLM applications. We also have, in addition to that, we have security podcasts that you can find on the website. We have a newsletter that you can kind of subscribe with many topical pieces of advice there. So overall, a broadening scope for the project and a wealth of information. So a few weeks ago, I don't know if you saw it on LinkedIn, we decided to expand the project's remit, and we decided to rename the project into Gen.AI Security Project, and then start targeting the various roles in the security lifecycle and produce different guidelines using initiatives. And so part of the renaming of the project was also creating governance structure, because we want to be transparent, we want to be independent, and have integrity of how people can make proposals, of how we can make them become an initiative, of how we publish documents, because people rely on our advice, and we want to make sure that that remains in the ethos of OWASP. And as part of that, we were also elevated to a flagship project, which was a real achievement, one of the fastest lab to flagship projects. So really proud of that. But really the key for all of you is that there is a structure, there is a governance in place that you can go. I can't cover it on this call, but if any of you want to get involved, want to lead, there are specific rules now of how people can become initiative leads, how they can become board directors, and how they can produce all of that great guidance that I mentioned earlier on. But let's start a little bit going through the various initiatives and the additional information that we have. So we talked about the top 10. We talked about expanding excessive agency. We're going through a period in AI where it's the threshold of LLMs simply producing output, whether that's codes, video, or text, to actually driving systems. And that's really the definition of agency that becomes actionable. And that brings a new set of risks and threats and vulnerabilities, which we didn't want to overwhelm the top 10. So we have the excessive agency as the overall framework, if you like, of agentic AI. But then I proposed, and we started this initiative back in just before Christmas, the Agentic Security Initiative. And our aim is to keep supporting the top 10. But since we have this rapidly changing landscape with agentic AI to give you resources so that you can understand, prepare, defend, and build agentic applications that help you differentiate in the marketplace or in your industry. We've already released the threats and mitigations, and that has been received really nicely. But obviously, no one has the time to read 50 pages of reports as good as they may be. So I've created the Agentic Threat Navigator explaining the risks and the threats that we see. We want to take it out very early so that we get feedback. And we're going through now a 1.1 kind of discussion. So if any of you want to take part and give us feedback, you're always encouraged and welcome. We have a view that says you can't just theorize about threats, you need to prove them in action. So we have a GitHub repository there with code, with samples of vulnerable agentic code using any framework that you like. And we started very actively inviting all of you to create samples that help us define this and demonstrating this better. And we support that with a series of hackathons. We had the first one in New York in April the 1st. Hugely successful, and we're going to announce the winner at the RSA conference the 30th of this month. And we are planning to have, and hopefully Kainos will host that in May or June, a European one. And it won't just be on-prem, it will be virtual, so you guys can join too. So we can create vulnerable agentic applications and demonstrate the threats and mitigations. Something that's coming, I think, this week or next week is the threat modeling guide with Maestro. That's a new methodology because the existing methodologies don't cover actually the agentic landscape easily. And so one of our leading members who leads this particular work stream, Ken Huang, I'm sure you've seen him on LinkedIn. He's also a highly respected author and part of the Cloud Security Alliance. He's come up with Maestro. So we're releasing a guide of how you can threat model the threats and mitigations and agentic, multi-agentic systems in more detail. So keep an eye on that. What follows then, and there is a logic behind our releases. So we want to start with telling you these are the things that happen on agentic AI. This is how you threat model them. And this is how you secure them. So the securing agentic app is coming after RSA conference sometime in May. It covers designing, deploying, developing agentic apps, including some of the more recent things, the MCP and the Google's agent-to-agent protocols that seem to be everyone is talking about in agentic AI. So that will be a document that we again will ask for on LinkedIn for public feedback. We'll present it in various events so that we can get your feedback, and we ask you to be involved. And then at the end, we want to. I talked about the samples. I want us to also inform you of what other tools, because you may not always have the capability or even the time to implement everything. So knowing what tools, what compliance and legislation requirements are really important. So that's coming. That's the kind of the agentic security initiative, very ambitious roadmap to help you embrace securely agentic AI that seems to be absolutely taking off. And as it takes off, it's really hard for us to keep up with those changes. So sometimes you can't just wait to release the next version of your document or your guidelines, because things have changed massively, and we rely on the community. We trust the community to help us with that. So we at the Agentic Security Initiative of the project find different ways, and that's kind of logic that we use across the project of engaging with the community to help us respond whilst we're creating the main guidelines. So we supported two of the workstream leads doing the secure agentic apps to release a very thorough paper on a research paper on enterprise grade security on the latest model context protocol, and it has become quite popular, and that's now kind of going into the guidelines that we will release in May. And again, it just shows how OWASP with its community ethos can both produce authoritative and peer-reviewed documents, but also constantly and rapidly respond to new changes without having to do long waterfall life cycles. On top of that, we're doing an open workshop at the RSA conference in San Francisco, the 30th of April. I understand that not all of you will be able to be there, so we've decided to live stream it. And I would love to see you all on the live stream so that you can ask your questions and be part of that conversation. So that's the agentic stuff. The top 10 and the agentic stuff give you an overview of the threats, of what we need to do with those threats. But then we released the Generative AI cybersecurity and governance checklist. And that's really, how do you start? This is primarily for CISOs and security decision makers and stakeholders. How do you start your journey into generative AI? Sandy Dunn, one of my fellow board directors, she released that, extremely successful. So if you have, if you work with CISOs, if you work with in cybersecurity teams, this is a great checklist to start your journey into generative AI. And with that understanding of what the threats are with the top 10 and the agentic AI, you take this checklist and you establish what the landscape in your organization is and where you need to worry. Because simply kind of writing code and defenses is obviously what we normally do as developers, but having that broader context to support us is really important. So we have released this checklist that has become very popular across decision makers and CISOs. And I think it's really educating for everyone to read on the things that you need to have to start your security journey. And so once you have started that, the other thing you need to consider is data. Of course, it's an obvious fact that applications consume data, but as we know, AI relies heavily on live data, provides new and different ways of accessing and exfiltrating data. And so we have decided to release the Data Security Best Practices Guide that takes you through a deep dive into adversarial AI. What are the specific data threats for LLM? I think 6 out of 10 of our items are data-centric, but how does that work? What are the different considerations if you have, for instance, training data extraction with prompt injection-driven data leaks from connected data stores? So the document does a great job, in my view, in giving you that taxonomy and allowing you to understand how to secure. It gives you some practical controls on data lifecycle, and it isn't just about when you get to develop your application, which is really important. But obviously, if you don't have compliance, if you don't have the governance, if you don't have anonymization when it's needed, if you use someone else's data and you don't have the appropriate control in places, then you may fall foul of compliance. So all those items are being defined and discussed by this best practice guide. And then it comes with several practical security strategies there, privacy enhancing technologies, including things like differential privacy, traditional techniques like encryption, all the things that you need to put in place so that if you have a generative AI application in place, you minimize, you reduce the risk that this has on your data security. Monitoring and auditing with some good examples of how to do that, and then different deployment strategies, exploring what are your data risks in an LLM application, whether it's on-prem, whether it's on cloud, the data. And even now, we're seeing LLMs with Gemini and others being on mobile devices. What are the kind of different types of risks and how can you mitigate them? So an excellent piece of work from a colleague, Emmanuel, there, and it includes some key insights of the future trends of where the data security is going. So this is a resource that you can use in addition to all the things that we said about top 10 during your planning and design and implementation and deployment of your LLM application. The next item, which is actually one of the most popular reports after top 10, is the AI Red Teaming Guide. You're developing an application. You need to make sure there is assurance in place. And assurance, has always been a key part of a cybersecurity function. You cannot just hope for the best. You must make sure that security, the security robustness, and the security posture is in place. But obviously, LLM changes that. Traditional assurance assumes deterministic relationships. So, in other words, if I test something outside generative AI, if I give it A, it will always give me B. What LLMs and generative AI changes is that if I give you A, it may come back with B, but sometimes it may come back with different outcomes like C and D. And so you need, that's a stochastic system, that's a kind of non-deterministic system, and changes fundamentally how we test and red team LLM systems and generative AI systems. And that's what the generative AI red teaming guide does really well by giving you a methodology of addressing that. It actually goes beyond that fad that we saw, that fashion that we saw, that, oh, let's red team the model by sending all kind of prompt injections, which actually may not be applicable to you, because LLMs and generative AI create this massive, particularly the models, create this massive attack surface. However, that may not be applicable to you because your application, the restrictions are different. And this is where the methodology talks about threat modeling, talks about a risk-based scoping, and things like how do you evaluate the system, how do you evaluate the AI and the runtime abuse, and it offers this really nice phase blueprint of how to do red teaming, where you focus on the model based on your threat model and your risks, not boiling the ocean with generic things. If you have an application that does, I don't know, citizen advisory or financial advisory, you have restrained the model, so you know whether they can break it to ask, kind of inappropriate things, maybe not the top of your concerns. But things like your platform, your application, the runtime, all of those things are part of the overall AppSec for a generative AI application. And that's what the blueprints are trying to do. They try to say, don't just test the model, test the system end to end, and we give you those pillars and how to test them. Making sure that it's continuous and how do you implement that, using adversarial inputs to make sure that you test the system appropriately. And of course, this is now a cross-functional and multi-stakeholder exercise, because there will be many different concerns about the LLM applications. And this is what the guidelines give you from this document of how to mature a cross-functional team to do that continuous testing and to that kind of systematic, integrated red teaming. As I said, one of the best documents that we have, really, really esteemed, and I really encourage you to read it. There is some interesting research another initiative has done, the Threat Intelligence Initiative, and they evaluated using of LLMs for offensive cybersecurity tasks, and that can be used to generate exploits and help you with pen testing and red teaming of LLM applications. What we found is that it can be a useful aid, but it isn't really a substitute for a cybersecurity professional doing their offensive AI. And I think we found that actually the API-based tools, the Claude and OpenAI's ChatGPT, offer a very good performance, where we're a bit disappointed on the kind of hosted models. I think DeepSeek didn't perform as we were expecting it to. But regardless of that, you can find out all that on the guide. It's something that you can use yourselves during your red teaming guidance. Something you should be doing, because, as I said, this is a kind of extended attack service with LLM. So using tools to help you do red teaming is really, really important and productive. We talked about the use of threat modeling to constrain the problem, to make sure it's relevant to you and risk-based. Sometimes the issue with threat models is that they can be very narrative intensive, lots of text, lots of diagrams, lots of things that you need to go through. I think they're very useful, but sometimes they elongate the life cycle. And so I think it's next week, the author of the cybersecurity checklist and governance checklist, she has initiated a set of tools that bring a more innovative, more agile, if you like, approach to do assurance and evaluation of risks using that loop, the observe, orient, decide, and act. And this is, for instance, a spreadsheet that allows you to very quickly evaluate the risk and the type of threats, reference your concerns, reference the existing vulnerabilities that we know, and that gives you a more rapid and agile life cycle that can go much, much faster. And it's very operationally friendly. So keep an eye on this. And I know Sandy is very keen on feedback from any practitioners. I mean, I use it on my I've started using it in my practice and giving feedback to it. And I find it very interesting complementing threat models as a faster way of capturing risk and threats. So when it comes out, give it a go and give us feedback and be, again, part of that conversation. But overall, again, just to reiterate, we'll give you what the threats are. We'll give you tools to secure your data and develop securely. And then we give you the tools with those documents and the tooling there to assure and understand the risk and make sure that there is no residual risk. Of course, there will always be incidents. No matter, there's no absolute security, even with the best of advice. So another area we've been focusing on is the initiative is called threat intelligence, but the focus really is on AI incidents response. You may be surprised we started with deep fakes, and we did that because there was an increasing concern there of how deep fakes can be handled. People were asking us questions about, do you know of any tools that detect deep fakes? The conversation kind of focused on that. How can we detect deep fakes? So we took a step back, and two of our top kind of researchers and leads, Rachel and Brian, they created this fantastic guide on preparing and responding to deepfake events, very forensic. Instead of trying to find the simple and often, not kind of real approach, which is a magic tool that will detect deepfakes, into a more practical, scenario-driven. They're given some good scenarios and hiring help desk finance. You can see them, they're a legal process. And instead of giving you that, rely on your detection, they give you a defense in depth approach of how to mitigate, how to prepare the organization and mitigate against deepfakes, which are increasingly becoming a threat both to individuals and organizations. I'm sure you have heard about audio voice deepfakes. That's actually, there is a competition that just finished in the US from the FTC on audio deepfake detection. So that's why we focused on that to start with. We also introduced now the incident response. In addition to that, the incident exploit roundup submission form, where you can go and submit your incidents, and a security and incident exploit roundup, where if you go to the website, you will find the list of the latest incidents, real life incidents. And I think that's useful for us for two reasons. One is to inform people what's happening and prepare to mitigate against them, gives them something to try out the incident response and say, well, is this going to work against this type of incident? But also, informs us as we build more and more guidelines of what happens in the real world rather than in just academic papers. And so this is kind of, if you like, we prepared quite a bit with the incident response, but something that we're working on actively, and Rachel and Brian are leading, is the incident response handling guide. It's at the kind of drafting stage. We will release it sometime, I believe, the first consultation in May, but I may be wrong, but around those times. So that will be, if you like, another useful resource for you to prepare for your incident response. But I would really encourage you, if you're deploying Gen.AI applications, look at around kind of the roundup and say, are we as an organization ready to handle those types of incidents that we see there? And so moving more towards the security operations now. So we kind of deployed, tested, developed. We know how to or figuring out how to respond to AI incidents. We also want to operationalize defenses. We want to understand how to help you with tools. So we have this solution landscape that has been extremely successful. As always, as I'm sure you all know, we don't recommend products, and the kind of crown jewel for us is our independence, that we're vendor independent. So we are not taking any position on the quality of those tools, and we allow everyone in a very open process to go and register their tools. But we give you a curated list of those tools, and rather than just listing them, we connect them into a LLMSecOps lifecycle and framework, so that you can use those tools from planning, experimentation, and development all the way to deployment and operation, and connecting them to the top 10 and all the other threats and mitigations that we have. And the reason for that is, again, if you are struggling against deadlines, if people kind of demand fast and LLM applications, there are tools out there that you can use, and it makes sense to use tools rather than build your own bespoke defenses. And this is what this solutions guide does, and it's because again it's very extensive. You can find out the database actually on the website. We also have a cheat sheet that you can take. It's kind of compressed form, but it gives you all those tools that I mentioned, and it also gives you a framework of how they connect to, so that you can utilize them all the way from development to testing and deployment. And actually, I was surprised of how many tools exist out there, both open source and commercial. Sorry, my next one. And finally, we are proudly aiming at the developer and security professional audiences, but those things cannot happen in isolation. You can have the best possible application defenses, but if within the organization there aren't the appropriate structures to support you, that security can be undermined and that security can fail. And so as a result, we've released the Center of Excellence Guide that tells you how to do that end to end, how to bring in ethics, how to do responsible AI, different types of structures that you can have in working groups, and the different type of roles that you can have. And also, we understand that this is not going to happen on day one, so we have some recommendations there of how you can implement it. That isn't a developer reading. That is something for you to take it to, unless you have a cybersecurity leader function, role, then you can use it too. But normally, take it to those who talk about AI governance, talk about AI security, and the objective here is to provide organizations with something that make the work that we do to secure generative AI succeed, because without the appropriate organizational structures, that work may fail. And that's kind of all the resources that we have. I hope you kind of find useful and I'll be interested in your views actually on the resources that we have. And if I wanted to bring them all together, this is a useful kind of guide of how you can use them across the life cycle and across when you integrate, when you bring in generative AI applications. So the top 10 for LLM applications will always remain the headline that sets if you like, the core, the foundation of what generative AI is all about. Some of that will evolve much faster. The agentic AI is one of that. So the agentic security initiative resources that I talked about will help us and you keep the focus on the overall generative AI, but also follow the latest that happens without missing out and without distracting yourself. To support that work in an organizations that need to understand where they are, that's where the checklist is. Start your journey, understand where the gaps that you have, data, the essence, the oil, if you like, of AI. Use those best practices in your design and your development work, and then again, a cornerstone in making sure security is in place. Use the red teaming guide and the LLM exploit study to adapt your testing and assurance for generative AI applications, and don't always kind of wait for an external party to do that. Integrate it in your working practices. The generative AI compass, new tool, play with it, is how to accelerate actionable risk management. I find it amazing, actually. So try to give it a go and see how that helps you understand the risks better, both for defenses, but also handling incidents. And that's where the next couple of things help you. It's really important to use them tools to prepare and respond to generative AI incidents. Don't wait until something happens. And the last couple of items are organizational support and making sure that you have the appropriate support whilst you're securing applications. These are stuff that you can go and use. I wanted to make sure that you understand that we're beyond the top 10, that the top 10 just kind of sets the agenda, if you like. And you can't just use it, you can also be part of that. We are very proud to be a community-driven project. Everyone has a voice, everyone has an equal voice in the work that we do. So this is before I start answering any questions and taking any feedback. We have we have multiple meetings across initiatives, but the flagship meeting we have is every other week on Wednesdays. I put the QR code. Come and join us. It's a Zoom meeting. We have great conversations there, transparent and open. And of course, you cannot have a conversation just once every 2 weeks. Slack is where we are. It's the same OWASP, like the link there. Trying to find channels like LLM and Gen.AI, and you will find us there, and you can engage and be part of that journey. And that's what I had for today. I hope I didn't exceed the time.
Yeah, this is really within the time. And
Excellent.
talking about time, for the people that may not recognize the PST zone, it's
Okay.
Pacific Standard Time, and I think that's about 9 hours behind us.
Yes, that's. I think no, the 9. It tends to be 5 o'clock in the UK, so 6 o'clock your time. Apologies, I just copied and pasted the time. I should have changed it.
No problem. But to make
Yeah.
clear, it's well, close to 8 now, 1948 currently in the Netherlands. So, and if I can believe Google, it's 10:47 in PST.
Yeah.
So people that were wondering, 9 a.m. is right at the end of the business day here in the Netherlands.
Yep. So it's a nice time to join us and have a conversation about generative AI and security.
Okay, so I think the reaction from Dennis in the chat sums up quite nicely. Thank you for the overview of resources. It's very helpful. I haven't seen any questions yet, but that doesn't mean we don't have any. The first one, in the risks associated with AI, and especially then chatbots, what is your view on false promises made by chatbots? Because I recall that Air Canada was affected by a chatbot that promised all kind of
Exactly.
predictions.
Yes.
And that was actually, they were actually legally bound to, well, provide those.
And that's a casebook example of in the first top 10 we call it over reliance. In other words, just because something comes out of an LLM, you don't have to assume it's always correct, because they have something called hallucinations, which is, those tools don't have any intelligence. Those models, they have absorbed humongous amount of text and data, and they created probabilities of how one word will come after the other. And based on that, if you ask it a question, it will find what's the most likelihood of words responding to this. And they do it in a way that's really, really convincing. But it's not, based on intelligence. It's not based on reason. So you have to make sure that you apply, and that's both over-reliance in our previous top 10 and misinformation in this one. You have to apply some human in the loop for critical applications. The interesting thing with that is, how do you scale that? It's okay if you have a single user to chat bot conversation, But when you start having agentic applications, and I have seen examples of 12 different agents automating with each other conversations and critiquing each other's output. How do you scale that? That's a conversation we're having at OWASP at the moment too. And I think the answer there is focus on the most critical thing. Because if you think about it, even when we hire humans, and I have a team, I don't always assume everything they tell me is completely accurate. And I don't spend all my hours reviewing everything that they've told me. I rely on management by exception, on kind of checking what's most critical for me. So nothing that will come out of that is guaranteed to be, not everything that comes out of LLM is guaranteed to be accurate because of hallucinations, but it doesn't mean, we have to completely disregard the value that they bring. It's just we need to find that grade of risk, and there will be more and more coming from us, especially, and we already kind of discussed that on the agentic threat and mitigations of how to scale the human in the loop. And I hope that answered your question rather than waffle.
Yes, it does. Interesting, to say the least, the hallucination part, and I don't even need mushrooms for that. Now, another question. What about the chatbots operating, well, independently mostly? Because I've seen chatbots on website, of course, that help. Let's say you are running a company, it would promote your products, but it can also be manipulated, and I guess that might be part of the prompt injection to compare your product with competitors in a bit more honest than you would like. How should companies, does it indeed fall under the prompt injection, or is this a different category altogether?
I think, I'm not sure if I understood correctly, is how can I make sure that people don't abuse my own chatbots to get, kind of some undesired outputs. So we had a DPD here in the UK. They put a chatbot without testing it, and you need to test. That's why we have the red teaming guide. And they didn't test it sufficiently, and they ended up looking silly because the chatbot kept saying, that DPD is stupid, and they also started swearing at the user, which created some reputational damage, but not the end of the world. It's just reputational damage. So if you are hosting your chatbot, you need to test for those things. You need to restrict all that with prompt engineering, with guardrails. Those are the things that we have on the, look at the misinformation entry that we have in the top 10. If it's someone else's chatbot that produces that, they're using another chatbot to produce misinformation about you, that's a very different and difficult task. That becomes then a legal issue of how you protect your organization's reputation. But overall, if you're in control, then you need to make sure that you test for those things. There are approaches, the guide gives them some, and you need to kind of tighten the guardrails and the prompt engineering that you do.
Yeah. Oh, I can concur with that. Meanwhile, in the chat, Kumaresh asked a question as well. How do we deal with the impact on culture and learning in the enterprise in the AI encoding assistant era?
I think it's a broader question about all of us having a balanced view towards AI. It's not, the magic pill to everything, but it is for sure a era-defining moment that we have. So I personally use AI, Gen.AI constantly. Things that I could do in, it would take me weeks to do. Now it takes me days. I'll give you an example. We had a hackathon in Kainos, and I chose to do a Chrome plugin that uses ChatGPT to detect a top 10 for web applications. Of course, some of the things that they told me, the ChatGPT stuff, weren't always right, and I had to apply, a review model to refine them and all that. But what it did is, if I was to do a Chrome plugin myself, it would take me weeks to do. And basically, by asking it, it helped me do it within 2 days, which is amazing, actually, if you think about it. So we need to find that balanced view within organizations. So when we talk to our managers and they said, oh, Code Copilot is a fantastic tool. Yes, of course, but it comes with risks of producing vulnerable code. It comes with risks with creating something that's not necessarily accurate and productive. And this education of all of us that, yes, those tools are fantastic, but they have some drawbacks and therefore they're not magic bullets. That would be my approach.
Okay. Well, I think that sums it up and nice on time. So this is the correct moment for a short break. John, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you
if you
all.
would like to stay a bit, perhaps other questions may arise in the chat. I will relay them to you otherwise. Oh, actually, as a matter of saying, um, there is actually another question. Let me
Okay.
see. Yeah, we have time for that, I think.
Uh-huh.
HBR, not entirely sure what HBR stands for,
I think
recently
it's our
pointed out
view. Yeah.
one of the biggest current use cases for LLMs is therapy. Do you think the current level of LLM security is mature enough to be sharing such deeply sensitive information?
That's an excellent question, and it comes into and David, you must come and join the agentic security initiative. We're discussing some of that. One of the vulnerabilities that we found is the trust manipulation. In other words, you develop such a big trust with an agent and a model because it gives you such convincing answers, and ChatGPT has evolved massively, for instance, that other people can manipulate. So there are a couple of things that we need to unpack. One is be careful what you share, especially if you don't have the guarantees that people are not going to reuse your data to retrain the model or to sell it to someone else. That's kind of a classic. So you need to be careful what you divulge. I would say it's more than kind of security there. I think the biggest problem that I see is one of safety and having realistic expectations. And it goes to the previous question from Kumaresh around the culture of how much we trust and how much we sound check what AI gives us. So I think there are security implications, but I would worry more about the safety of someone who uses without any guidance, without any grounding, unquestionably AI. And thank you very much, all of you. And again, my point was to kind of invite you to be part of that work that we do.
Yeah, well, thank you for the presentation. With that, this includes the first half of the OWASP Netherlands chapter meeting for April. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you're all back here to watch the second presentation of today, the presentation by Nariman about the SAMM roadmap to SSDLC, the Security Assurance Maturity Model and Secure Software Development Lifecycle. Quite a lot of abbreviations. Let's see what he makes of it. Nariman, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And hi, everyone. Welcome to OWASP Netherlands chapter's tonight's event. And I'm going to share with you how you can use OWASP SAMM to structurally assess and improve your organization's secure software development lifecycle. My name is Nariman Aga-Tagiyev. I'm into software development for about 22 years, and last 8 years, I specialized in application security as a cybersecurity architect. Today, any serious organization would have their own secure software development lifecycle SSDLC policy that development teams are supposed to be following. But are you aware what is actually the situation in all the departments of your organization? If you go and do the assessment and ask around people, you might be quite disappointed because that global policy that is communicated to you typically represent the perfect world scenario, the target situation that we want to be. To help you to actually bring where you want to be, There are multiple frameworks. One of them is OWASP SAMM, Software Assurance Maturity Model, but there is also BSIMM, which a bit similar to a survey that you can ask when you assess every scope. It helps you to identify the gaps. Then it helps you to create small steps for improvement. And it has lots of guidances how to actually implement every step. And some people also use it as a baseline for documenting their life cycle when they want to prepare a white paper just to show what they're actually doing. I'm going first directly into the model, just to will explain what is it, and then I want to focus today what does it actually take to implement a maturity program in a big corporate organization. Let's just go over it very fast. I will not go into every detail, but the model has about 90 activities. It has many business functions. They're grouped into different categories and multiple streams. Let me show you that. So every category is called business function: governance, design, implementation, operation. Then under them, you have security practices like strategy, compliance, education, and every practice has a stream. Every stream would have a 3 activity, from the simplest, which is expected from you as a baseline, to a more proper way to do this activity. And the 3rd level would be the advanced, which actually you're doing it right and very good. If you go to owasp.org, under model, for each activity, it clearly explains the benefit, to explain why we're doing this, and there is explanation of activity itself. Then next to it, you also have a question that you use to ask when you do this assessment to your colleagues. And for each question, you have a list of quality criteria. If you are doing all of them, it means that you are doing this activity for that given maturity level. And what's important is that you're supposed to be focusing on one scope at a time. So you can do it for multiple departments in your organization. Then you have quality criteria, but we also have multiple levels of answers. So maybe you're doing this activity, maybe you're signing the code before you deploy it, but you do it only for the half of the apps because the other one is still in development and it's still to be implemented there. So you can select if this answer is covering some of the apps, half of the apps, most of the apps, and OWASP.org in the resources section has some useful tools that automatically calculates the score for every category of activity. Now, before you go into assessment, I already mentioned that you do it for one scope, but what is the scope? It can represent multiple stuff. Sometimes if you have a SaaS solution, or if your organization is not too diverse and you have single process for all the teams, you can do one assessment covering all the teams, and that's maybe like global assessment. You might choose to assess a business unit to see how mature that business unit is. You can select one product line, maybe a pipeline, a build pipeline, or just a team. So everything is possible, and this tool is for you, for development teams to identify their own gaps. Let's say you picked one scope, you did assessment, and in the results tab of the toolbox that you can download in the OWASP SAMM, you will see the spiderweb diagram showing how mature you are for every category. Once you have that result, what you will do next is you will talk with developers or with the product owner, whoever your stakeholders are, and you decide together on your target. Because the goal here is not to make 3.0, because you can go up to 3.0 from 0. The goal is not to make it perfect on every area, but the goal is to set the right target for that scope, whatever makes sense for them. Let's say you set the target. Now you can take your time, maybe take a quarter, few months to work the plan. Then you set a new target, you do reassessment, you add a bit more, and this represents just the extra next level where you want to get. and you work again, then you set a new target. I guess you got the point. And your objective here is, as I said, not to reach complete circle, but to measure how far are you to your target, and you work toward that. If you are curious how your organization compares to other companies, we also have some benchmark. If you go to owasp.org, and in the resources, you can find benchmark with a video and presentation explaining that. Lots of SAMM practitioners, they donate anonymously results of their assessments, of course, after taking permission from the company they are assessing. And the SAMM core team every year makes a presentation out of it, and they explain what activities that are done almost everywhere and what activities that are done almost nowhere. And you can read a very nice report about it. So if you go to owasp.org/benchmark, you can find it. It's quite interesting. Now, I just explained how you would do the assessment, but I want to tell that actually going to your team and doing assessment once everybody is on the boat with you is easy. It's the easiest part is just to read the owasp.org, read the activity explanation, criteria, answers, download the Excel file, fill it in, and see results. That's easy. What is more difficult, and that is not shared so often and more difficult to find information about, is how you handle the process, how you convince your management to let you do that and invest lots of time, of your time and of your colleagues. Because you have to compete against other policies. You have NIST CSF, SSDF, Microsoft Development Lifecycle, have ISO 27034, which represents also about development lifecycle standard. How do you manage to convince your manager if they tell you why we would do SAMM? Our policies are based on NIST SSDF. And even better, they might like OWASP SAMM approach because we divide every activity to multiple levels, but instead of going to SAMM, they can suggest, why don't we structure our own policy like SAMM, make a survey out of it, and you go to every team and just make assessment based on our today's own policy. That kind of can make sense. I tried that. I will try to rewrite our own policy and divide it into multiple levels, but very quickly you realize that you're reinventing the bicycle, because some core team, they are doing this for many, many years, I believe 12, 15 years already, and the model is very mature itself. So it's much better to use existing model. And for me to come up to this conclusion, it took time and lots of challenges, but because OWASP is a community and every month they have a community call, two actually. So this is the US friendly time, but there is on Fridays, now also European time. I would go to this community and I explain my path to kick off the SAMM. I would say I was offered to rewrite our own policy. And the team would give me really nice, insightful ideas, how to convince, how to explain. And while I realized that if you really believe in what you want to do, if you have the right courage, if you're brave enough and have commitment, and you need some capabilities, and for capabilities like skills, I went to this SAMM core team, you build the confidence. So after even getting no, I would go back again and again to our teams, and then you can convince that it's right. Now, you have some strong arguments why you need SAMM. So maybe some of you still think you should not start from SAMM, because why not use the NIST government supported program? SAMM is different. Most of those standards, ISO, NIST, they are checklists. They are for audit. But SAMM is about where you want to be. It's not about where you are today. It's not about assessment. It helps you to prepare tailored roadmap per software factory. And it helps you to get and prepare for ISO certification. So it helps you to prepare for NIST audit. And every activity, if you go to the community guidance document under every activity, while I'm speaking, you can already go maybe online and check it out as I speak. It has a link to OpenCRE project. And OpenSeri is a mapping of mappings. So once you implement one SAMM activity, you can navigate to OpenSeri from that activity, and you see how that activity maps to all other frameworks. And OpenSeri has many. It's like a graph of connections. It connects you to all other standards, and you can exactly see how good you are there. And I mentioned it has benchmarks available also, compared to other companies. Now, let's say you got the green light, you're going to assess your company. You have two options. You can take a small step by step. You can go to one scope, just try it out, learn your way, and see how it goes. Or you can make a big bang assessment, just invite all the department security officers, run the assessments with them, and organize a workshop where everybody present their maturity and share their challenges, what they need to improve with each other. I did both. I experimented first in one of the organizations, but then we also did a huge big bang assessment, and that was great team building event for all the security officers, and we start to communicate better with each other and help each other to mature everywhere. Now, when you run one assessment, you are sitting with a team responsible for the product or for that scope. There are some challenges here because so far all those people are approached for different reasons. They are approached by auditors, usually with these similar questions. They are approached by salespeople that need to answer security questionnaires, and your goal is always to say yes as much as possible to this, because you want your company to look good, right? So you would go extra mile to find the right policy to say yes to that question and attach that policy. But here, it's different. It's about helping those people responsible for the scope to understand their maturity and tell the actual truth. If there is a policy, but that activity is not done properly or people forgot about it, they should just say, we have a policy, but we don't do it. And they need to trust you and need to document it, because the goal here is to help that person to prioritize, to prepare their roadmap going forward to make more mature development lifecycle. So establishing the right stage and building the trust with the people you are assessing is very important here. Then you can also have different styles. So some assessors, they just go in that Excel toolbox, question by question, reading out the criteria like a survey and filling it in. Some other people, some practitioners, they just put Excel aside, even don't share their screen, and have a conversation. Ask, can you please explain how do you ensure that your build is secure? Can you explain your deployment process? And the response for the scope would tell, you can take notes, and later you're going back and fill in all these answers. So it's more like a dialogue. So different styles for these interviews. Premises. Some people prefer to really meet face-to-face or remotely. You can visit the customer or your department. So there are different ways to do that. And you can record it to be able to go back and note properly, or you can not record it on purpose to make sure people feel very comfortable about telling the truth if they have any problems. And for the notes, you can immediately take notes or record. That's also important part. Now, preparing for the interview, you could send the OWASP SAMM questionnaire in advance for every scope owner. But when they see the questions, they start to dig in and search where is that policy and try to find those answers. We recommend, as our SAMM core team, not to share if possible, and just connect to people and ask them what's going on. Because the goal here is not to be perfect. The goal is here to find the reality. If the department is not aware about incident response plan or is not aware about risk profiles, it means that it's not implemented properly. So I would just then say, no, this activity is not done properly because people are not aware, and make it a low-hanging fruit for that team to go and learn about it or communicate with developers, with the relevant teams, that that policy exists, and suddenly you're compliant and you've done that activity. So I would typically underscore wherever I want an improvement. And I tell it clearly to people. I said, look, our goal is not to score as high as possible. Our score is to identify what you want to improve next quarter or next year. Roadmap. Once you identify the gaps, you want to prepare the targets, the roadmap for those people. And if I tell people that let's prepare a roadmap together, they will say, I have a lot to do. Everybody is busy. Everybody already has objectives for that year. Imagine you're assessing now in April, but people already got objective in February to do something else, to introduce SCA, whatever. But you're coming and saying, I want to introduce yet another activity, code signing. People would say, no, sorry, I'm very busy already. That's very normal. How would I handle that? I would say, look, you already have something to do this year. You have some objectives for 2025. You have some plan for improvement. Let's map your existing objectives to the roadmap. Just show me out of these 90 activities, which one are relevant to your work this year, and let's set a target based on reality. What are you going to work already today? And this is how I convince departments, managers to create a roadmap, because I'm telling them I'm not adding extra work for you. Actually, I'm structurally showing what you're going to work on and what your teams are going to work on based on already existing priorities you have. I hope it makes sense. Now, tools, processes, I mentioned a couple of times the toolkit. So you have multiple perspectives here. For assessment, in OWASP.org, we have a toolkit, which is a Microsoft Excel file or Google Sheet file. It's automatically generated based on the model every time we change the model. Then you have OWASP SAMM, that is also open source project, which helps you to the assessment. But then if you want to follow up, there's also OWASP Open SAMMY open source project. It's also one of OWASP projects. This tool actually helps you to manage multiple scopes in one place and invite different stakeholders into that environment and assign tasks that people then implement the task, they come back, you can reassess, verify that the task is implemented, that activity is properly implemented, and you can change the maturity for that scope. So it helps you also to follow up. And when you want to present it, once you have some mature improvements, you can again use OWASP SAMM toolkit, the Excel file, Google Sheet file. It has a tab with a status with lots of diagrams that you can just take screenshots and put into your presentation to show how good is that scope. Or again, OWASP SAMMY has some charts. But in some organizations, if you already have dashboards, you can just use those yourself as well. And for the change management process, I mentioned that Open SAMMY can be helpful to follow up on the progress, but in our organization, we have our own objectives framework and tool where we define our goals. So it's not mandatory to use this Excel file. You can define the roadmap and ask people then to update their yearly objectives in whatever change management process you're using, and use your in-house and dashboards to monitor those objectives results. Another very big impact, what I noticed after using SAMM for a couple of years, is that there was a big influence on the culture. Because typically all these policies, they were defined by cybersecurity teams. It will be published. But when you start to talk with people, with departments, with responsible for the build, for the governance, for the implementation, awareness grows. And when you start to show results from different scopes, if you have 40 departments and you start to show on dashboards how close they are to their targets, I'm not saying who is the best in the overage, because it's not important to be the highest in the overage. It's important that you are at your target, because sometimes it doesn't make sense to be too mature if it's just an on-premise app and you don't host it yourself, or it's a desktop app. You have different levels of expectation. But it's important that people are at the target that they should be. And when you start to show around and share successes and let people present, so every scope owner would come and tell what they changed, what they improved, and what challenge they have, others start to help them, and suddenly I see a community created between different departments, a cybersecurity community where people talk, and that's amazing. But lastly, I want to say that don't forget that all models are wrong and SAMM is a model, but some are useful. If you start to use it, you can find that some activities don't fit 100% to your organization. Like maybe we have lots of questions that ask, how do you handle the incident response? But maybe you just make a desktop app or that you give to your customers and they host it themselves or use it locally on premises. Then that category of activities in a SAMM model doesn't make sense for you. It's out of scope. And you can then blame the SAMM that it doesn't fit everyone, but that's not the goal. You need to use it useful for yourself. You need to use it in the way that will help you to mature, understand what you have, make the plan, and get better. There are lots of resources. I mentioned the website itself. We have a meetup. We have a YouTube channel where you have, I think, 4.5 hours of videos explaining every activity, how to implement it. And we have a goal, not just to provide you a tool for assessment. Our goal, big goal, is to help you mature your developer lifecycle for all companies. So we provide lots of resources, and we would like to invite specialists in future months in our monthly calls to tell about one of activities that you are really good at, because we want to help each other to grow all together. And local OWASP chapter events, here I am, here we are, all together. I'm sharing with you. I hope you start using it. Now, in a few weeks, in 2 weeks, during the OWASP Global AppSec, we have SAMM User Day. It's a full day program only dedicated for secure software development lifecycle, assessing, maturing the best practices, how to handle different situations. It's a great event. If you're traveling to Barcelona, come on Wednesday a bit earlier, and let's hang out together and socialize together and share experiences. That's about my presentation. I'm really curious about your questions. And if you are not friends yet together, feel free to add me on LinkedIn, ask your questions, and also join our Slack channel. If you go to OWASP general domain team in Slack, you will find the OWASP SAMM channel there. Do we have questions?
I think it's short but powerful. So thank you for your presentation. And we do have a first question from the audience. Deb Fletcher asks, we see some organization trying to combine SAMM and DSOMM into some kind of hybrid. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I even got a question before, why use SAMM? DSOM is more detailed and it's more clear for developers. DSOM, it's a DevSecOps maturity model. It's great to work together with DevSecOps teams, R&D teams, and it has very concrete questions, what you exactly do to make sure that you develop and build your software securely. SAMM is more generic, it's technology agnostic questions, and they cover much broader scope. They cover the governance, that you know your risk profiles, that you educate the people, you have the right culture. It has a threat modeling, it has architecture assessment activities, which is not part of the DevSec. It can kind of part of Dev, and it also covers operations a lot. So I would say that with OWASP SAMM, it's better tool if you're talking with product owners, R&D directors, and if you want to have broad view of the gaps of the policy and to see how ready you are for assessment using NIST, ISO, etc. But if you go to activities under the secure build, secure deployment, etc., in the references, we refer to DSOM, because DSOM explains much better how implemented. We are the roof, we are the baseline. And for every category activity, we are referring you to the right tools. And DSOM is the right tool to complete your DevSecOps activities. but start from us, and then you will definitely need this one as well.
All right, quite an elaborate answer. Thank you. It seems there are no additional questions just yet, except for one I have myself. If you are looking at OWASP SAMM, what is the first thing you would like to add or change about SAMM?
Yeah. Just 2-3 weeks ago, we had a SAMM core team summit, and we were discussing all together as a core team what we want to improve in a SAMM. There are a few things that are coming. First of all, I think the most important is we want to involve the community more in this. And we are going to create conversations, discussions on GitHub for every activity and let you comment on our guidances and let you ask the questions and give you feedback. And we also want to invite you to talk to us and share how you do those activities. So we want to spread the word more and like let you work with each other, be real community, be more a community. That's one. Then there are coming few improvements on the way how we going to assess and answer sets, because sometimes we have answers that says that this activity is done for half of apps, most apps, none of the apps, and we can be very harsh with criteria. If one of the criteria is not met, we just say this activity is not done. We would like to change that, and if you are doing part of the criterias, we want to recognize it. So the answer set will say in the future, yes, this activity is done partially, maybe it's done on ad hoc basis, or it's done regularly and structurally. So we're going to play with it a little bit, and probably towards the end of this year, around September, we'll have SAMM 3.0 version released. Today we have 2.2, and whatever is my opinion about what should be improved, we are actually doing this. So we know what I want about it, what I want to improve, and that's exactly what we have been discussing.
All right, thank you. So for the audience, let me put out a last call of question. Oh wait, there it is. Deck again. Deck again. Okay. Is there a specific size for organization, level of maturity, or vertical for whom SAMM fits best?
Is there a type of organization where SAMM fits best?
Size, type, level of maturity, or tech stacks in use.
So SAMM is technology agnostic, and that's why sometimes you can find it too generic, some questions, but it applies to any type of organization. And if you look at the benchmarks, we actually show exactly what industry we have in the benchmark. And for each industry, we show how mature they are. Because we don't have too many contributions. We want even more. I think we have, I don't exactly remember, but maybe one of my colleagues in chat can say maybe 60, 70 today, different organizations. But if you're going to use it, please donate yours as well. We'll take it into account. But today we cover a lot of industries. And for each industry, we show how mature they are, and it's applicable to all of them. We do plan to add more support if you are targeting certain type of assessment. For example, European Cyber Resilience Act is coming in next year in 18 months or so, which will require that you develop your product in a secure way from design time. That means that you will need to do lots of activities like threat modeling, SCA, SAS, all of them are described in the European Cyber Resilience Act. And SAMM is a perfect fit that will help you to prepare in a smaller steps to that standard. It's only missing a couple of activities like the Cyber Resilience Act say that you need to report findings to certain organization, and that depends per country. So we are not going to tell exactly where you need to report. but for almost everything it covers. But we are planning to add a separate landing page soon, which will exactly give you a guideline how to get ready to CRA, the Cyber Resilience Act. It will tell exactly which activities in the SAMM are needed, what you need to implement yourself. Today we have already mapping, so you can go just download a raw Excel file which shows you which SAMM activity maps to CRA. It's a draft mode for now, but you will get lots of support for that. And in the future, we probably will add more such pages. So if you're really targeting NIST, CSF, or ISO, we will have a landing pages explaining that if you want to get to ISO, here how it overlaps, and here's what's extra exists in ISO or missing in ISO. We will have a good explanation there. That's also coming in the future. But the base model is quite good. And if you don't agree, tell us, because every year we reassess and we try to add and update what's needed. But we never use specific technology in a language. We don't say like AI or cloud. We try to be very generic there. I hope it answers the question.
Yeah, that's basically for Deck to say, but I think you have quite an elaborate answer, so yeah, it should suffice. I don't see any additional questions being added in the meantime. So thank you again for your presentation.
Yeah.
And I think that concludes it for today. Yeah, John is also still in the call. John, thank you again. So for all the spectators that are still here, thank you for your attendance, and we hope to see you again in June next for the next virtual chapter meeting. Of course, we also have a physical meeting planned somewhere later this year, and the Benelux days on 2 and 3 December. For now, if you have any feedback, please use the QR code to provide us with the information and help us improve with our chapter meetings. For any questions regarding the topics we just had, both speakers can be found, and I think we have some contact details on our website for them. And otherwise, of course, you can reach out to the project teams through the Slack channels they mentioned earlier. That's it for today. Thank you all, and have a nice day.